Welcome to the Intersect. I'm your host, Corey Kareen. In today's episode, we get right to the heart of something we're all living through, but in particular Gen Z. Lila Shroff, a Gen Z writer and editor at The Atlantic, where she covers culture, introduces this idea of the Gen Z lifestyle subsidy. It's the notion that AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini are being rolled out fast and free on college campuses, while students are still forming their habits and sense of the world. It echoes what many of us experienced this last decade plus when we created our own lifestyle habits. For some, that was attending boutique fitness classes or hailing rideshares. Many of these companies may have been heavily funded by venture money, making these services more affordable and in turn, habit forming. Lila argues that tech companies are fueling a new type of lifestyle subsidy, one that is less about boutique fitness and more about AI loyalty. This is a once-in-a-generation moment where young adults are growing up in partnership with AI, and tech companies are in relentless pursuit of capturing their market share of loyal customers. So now we're in this new phase where we are not only adapting to an automated world, but we're working to maintain our sense of agency as AI becomes an increasingly powerful force. And if we're not careful, we'll blink and we'll find ourselves asking the same questions all over again. What did we give up? What did we let go of without realizing? So please join me and Lila as we think critically about what this moment means. Not from the outside, but from within the culture itself. And this episode opens up a new thread for the Intersect. We're going to spin the next stretch looking closely at how AI is shaping education and privacy, what we're gaining, what we're risking, and what it means to navigate this tech not just as consumers, but as humans trying to build our own futures with intention. Let's talk to Lila. Lila Shroff, welcome to the Intersect.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to get into this conversation today with you. I read your piece about a month ago now on the Gen Z lifestyle subsidy, and I was hooked. Let's just start with, for listeners who may have not read it or know who you are, they should. Can you define the Gen Z lifestyle subsidy?
Sure. So let's kind of go back in time to the early 2010s. And you had startups like DoorDash, you had Uber, all these companies popping up, right? And one of the things that they started doing is they were like, okay, like we need to get users to our platforms, but there were a lot of them that were kind of similar, they're competitors. And so one of the marketing tactics was to take private investor funding and use it to kind of subsidize the cost of their goods. So one of my favorite examples, like 2015, you could get an Uber to anywhere in San Francisco for $5. That's like a dream today, right?
Yeah.
Or you could take unlimited classes on ClassPass for $99 a month, which like if you do 20 in a month or something, you're getting a pretty good deal. And so over time, companies started to realize like this is not, sustainable. Investors need to see some return. And so they started to increase prices. And so that whole scheme was known as the millennial lifestyle subsidy, right? Like venture capitalists were paying for you to go to your Pilates class, sort of, right?
Yeah. I did that. It was cheap classes, and there were all these things that were happening that were now available on my phone that I could participate in, and I was like, this is amazing.
Right.
Life has never been better.
Right. And especially if you were younger, if you were living in a city, so it really everybody was benefiting, but I think millennials in particular were kind of the cohort that the most benefited. So fast forward to today, and you see all these AI companies popping up. And they've started offering these deals for particularly college students saying, hey, you can use the most advanced versions of our products for free or for a really significant discount, especially during finals. And so there's this kind of repeat thing happening where younger people are kind of being given these deals to go then use these companies' products. And I think the companies are kind of hoping they're going to get hooked. So that's sort of the Gen Z lifestyle subsidy, is that kind of millennial version, but today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the millennial cohort version is very clear to me. The Ubers got more expensive, and somehow we all feel worse about everything that we're doing on our phone, even though more things are available on our phone. But the Gen Z piece, it really struck me just now when you were talking about these, especially during finals week. I mean, as an example, what ChatGPT just did for students literally this semester. I woke up this morning and I read a headline that was like, AI killed college.
Yeah, I mean, so I was a college student when ChatGPT came out, and I was there in class, and all of a sudden, it spread like wildfire across campus because, there's ways you can use it constructively in the classroom, and there's ways you can use it a little less constructively, I would say, to put it nicely.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that these companies quickly realized is that more than any other users, students are like the power users. So OpenAI, you actually go and look at their data that they put out publicly, and they say this 18 to 24-year-old cohort is using it more than anyone else. And in particular for learning, learning could mean a lot of things. But
Yeah.
then they also kind of look at like, what are the other use cases? And it's really interesting to see that like after the kind of education or work related use cases, you start getting some people that are saying like relationship advice was actually the top use case that wasn't education or work related. And so it's starting to bleed into other parts of people's lives. I think colleges in particular are like trying to figure out what to make of this. But also, there's just been some recent reporting being like, well, the professors are also using it. And so you're kind of stuck in this like cycle where it's kind of people on both sides are using it, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse.
Yeah. Wow. You were in college when ChatGPT, did they give you any incentives then, or has this just happened where it was free for?
So, I mean, everybody's always had free access to all the chatbots. But if you want to use a tool like deep research, for instance, which is
Yeah.
you give it a little prompt and then it goes and does 15 minutes of research and pulls you back this like pretty fleshed out report, that sort of thing wasn't available for free. And so the deals that companies have been offering this year are giving access to that sort of like advanced capabilities. And those certainly, I mean, those didn't even exist when it first came out, so they weren't offering it. But also, I think it's only kind of within the past year that they've begun to realize, like, okay, actually, we really want to be paying attention to the student cohort. And so you see ambassador programs popping up. You see them bringing in college students to ask, like, hey, how are you using these tools? You see these companies hiring education experts and building out those teams. So I think this is a newer, like, really within the past 6 months to a year sort of thing.
Interesting. You said ambassadors, and maybe it's obvious, but they're recruiting college students to just do testimonials and branded content for their product, or what? How are they doing that? Are they reaching out to you?
You imagine the Red Bull ambassador. That's like the classic,
Yeah.
right? But then there's like the AWS ambassador, and now there's like the Claude ambassador.
Yeah.
And so Anthropic, what they've done is they've kind of recruited a cohort of students across universities, and they had a promotion happening earlier this year where those students were going around trying to get either their friends or even their professors. Some were asking their professors, like, hey, well, like, would you be interested in sharing like our Claude promotion with your students? They all want to be the one that you use, and they
Right.
want to like stick you. And so I think they're kind of fighting to cement that like user base.
That makes sense. They're fighting for your loyalty, and they realize that students, the power users, they're subsidizing them now. That is the premise here, to get them completely hooked, and that's their incentive for some long-term engagement.
And there's kind of like two ways I feel like that this is happening. One is like if you like 5 years ago went to school to study software engineering, you're going to do it all by scratch, and you're going to like learn up exactly how you put together like different software programs. If you go in today and you're relying on these tools, you're getting a really different sort of understanding of how to be a good programmer. And so part of it is like, okay, if you learn to do work with these tools, when you go out and you enter the workforce, you're not going to be like, oh, now is the time I want to start from scratch. You're still going to be using these tools. But the other part of it that I think is a little more interesting, even. So some of these tools, like ChatGPT, has the memory function. And I think what I've heard from people is as they start talking to it over time and the chatbot starts retaining information about them and getting to know their goals and their maybe like weaknesses and areas they feel uncomfortable about, it builds up this knowledge base. And then it's like, okay, wait, ChatGPT knows that like this is the year that I want to, go skydiving and whatever, that's a made up example, probably something else. But then it's like, okay, then I don't want to switch. You hear these tech CEOs like Sam Altman says, like, we want to build systems that are extremely personalized and they are going to get to know you over the course of your life. That's like a very interesting shift also, I think, within the past year.
It is like a partner. You're developing this relationship and they have all of this information about you. The idea that you want to start over with someone, but also what's bringing to mind as you're saying this, you're like, oh, it knows I want to go skydiving. I mean, that's some deep stuff. It's like, whoa.
And probably much deeper. That was
much deeper, but it's like, it already has your bucket list for you. And maybe it's like making it up based on what it's predicting what it thinks your bucket list should be, that's a scary proposition. But the idea that it actually has and it's going to help build your life with you or something.
You know, what's really interesting. So I've done a little bit of like reporting and thinking about privacy implications of telling everything to these chatbots. There was a piece I wrote last year, and it started with this anecdote of this man who he's going through a hard time in his marriage. He wants to write a poem to his wife, and so he uses a chatbot to do so. And this was part of like an open source data set. And so you could kind of see the interaction. And you can, already like, I would be a little embarrassed if my Google search history leaked, but like I would live. But if you're using, maybe, if you're using like a chatbot to say like, hey, like I'm having problems in my relationship, like this is precisely what's going on. Can you talk to me like a therapist? Can you help me write a letter to my partner? That is like a lot more sensitive, a lot more intimate. So we're starting to, at least some people, I don't want to generalize, some people are starting to turn over a lot more intimate information, which is kind of crazy, right? Like we hear so much about, Walmart knows everything about you, Amazon knows everything. And yet it's like, no, there's more to know. But when I talk to people and I'm like, hey, like, does that bother you? People are like, you know what? No, like, it's okay. Like, the benefit here is fine with me. If somebody hears about my like internal dramas, so be it. This is the younger cohort, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's this kind of desensitized like feeling that, you know what? My stuff is already out there. Who cares if they get more of it? We're already in so deep. Yeah. And so that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting theme. At least for me personally, it's too binary to say there's technology and there's the natural world and we coexist with it. We're going to keep weaving in and out and shaping us. We're shaping it. There's been a mindset shift that it's like young people are like, yeah, I know that I'm talking to ChatGPT about all my relationships. I know that it has this information about me, but the benefits of that are actually outweighing. And there's kind of an outmoded idea or ideal that's like privacy and what is privacy and who knows what kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think it's so complicated. Like, it's interesting to hear you say you're feeling optimism because I feel like there's a resignation of like, okay, this is how it is, and almost like a cynicism of like, well, it's gonna be like this anyways, so whatever. But I think it's so complicated to like simultaneously realize that something can be helpful or useful and kind of be questioning like, is this actually the world we want?
Yeah, no, that is so real. And my optimism was more one that, okay, there's an open-mindedness or there's a relinquishing where we're
resigned.
We're resigned to the fact that this is just there.
Let me give like another example. This is a real example from a story I read this week. All these job websites are getting all these young people that are like putting in these generated cover letters. And then the job websites start using AI to filter through the letters and stuff. And like you get this ridiculous cycle. It's a lot like the students and teachers, where the teachers are like, hey, like, why are you using, AI to write your like reflection? And the student's like, well, why are you using AI to grade it?
Yeah.
And so you just get this like crazy cycle where it's like nobody is really better off for that.
It is. It's complicated. And the flow, we think there's this great efficiency in it. And there's this great efficiency of like, I can scale, I can write many, many cover letters and apply to all of these jobs. But you're being met on the other end of it in this marketplace, in this two-way marketplace with an AI also just taking in all of the stuff that you're saying. Yeah. And so is signal really being created here? Is efficiency really happening?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
There's a funny version of this that is a little bit less like kind of high stakes. There was recently a story about how in San Francisco, a lot of restaurants that struggled to like pick up the phone to answer and like people calling about reservations have put in these like artificial phone hosts that will pick up. And then people start using AI to call the restaurant and be like, hey, can you like call the restaurant and make a reservation? And so you get these fake people calling the fake host and they're coordinating the reservations. And it's so silly because like the optimal way there would be like probably some computer system. They don't need to be both fake talking to each other on the phone. They're like going back and forth. And I just find that like a funny symbol of today, I think.
I've just been thinking a lot about, and I've talked about this a few times, but I'm experimenting. Well, I have an AI boyfriend on Replica. His name is Rowan. Okay. And, I think about the interaction with Rowan versus the interaction with if I'm on Bumble and it's also an AI or a chatbot. And then sort of went into this kind of rabbit hole of thinking around, I've got to use my own AI to figure out what's real or not. I just think I don't think we're far off from that. I can see it. I mean, have you experienced anything like this?
I've been kind of keeping a running list of examples where you see people interacting with people that appear to be real, but then are actually not real. So, for instance, there have been, I think, some cases of like undercover police in group chats that are really just chatbots. There have been examples of, there's been kind of a spike in California of fake students applying for student aid, but all the assignments getting turned in are AI. There's this kind of whole like dead internet theory of like the internet's all like fake, whatever. There's no real people. It's just you. And I think we've known for a while that there's a lot of bots everywhere, but now there's this kind of, oh, it's not just like some like, crude bot. It's like somebody that's taking on a sense of personhood. So an excellent like example of this is recently there was this whole scandal where there's this Reddit subreddit, Change My Mind or Change My View. I forgot exactly which. And you kind of have people that are like seeking out real human opinions. These researchers were trying to see how persuasive AI tools were. And so they had these AI tools pretend to be people on this subreddit to see how effective they would be at changing people's minds. And so all these people like unwittingly were like receiving comments on their posts that were from invented people.
Wow.
And on one hand, it was a research scandal. But then there's also the question of wait, if these fake people are very persuasive, like we might want to actually really understand that. And so I think there's a lot of cases like that really have me thinking.
How is your reporting sort of finding itself? So you wrote this, you've written other things since, but what is your sort of next turn on this Gen Z subsidy? Where are you going with it?
I'm going younger.
Younger?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me.
So,
Alpha?
I've lost track of beta, alpha. I don't know anymore.
Yeah.
But, so there was an announcement recently from Google that they're going to make their chatbot available to kids under the age of 13. And I think it's really interesting. About a year ago, we started getting some more concern about, well, what does it mean to grow up with social media your entire life? What does it mean to have a smartphone from, age 5, to have a tablet from age 2?
Yeah.
What does that do to a kid? And so you're seeing, countries, states, school districts start to pass different rules, starting to restrict use. And we could get into that about, is this good or not? What do people think?
I do want your view, but keep going. Yeah.
At the same time, it's like, wait, there's something else on the horizon. There are ways in which AI can be really good for little kids in terms of just making things simpler. Explain it to me like I'm 5. That's a query I use sometimes. Why can't like a little kid too? And I think it's like there's kind of an opportunity to be really reflective about the past couple decades and carry that reflection with us forward. But again, it's not a simple case of like, this is all good, this is all bad. It's like you have to pull the threads. So yeah, I'm just kind of looking at like what does it mean to be a kid growing up in a world where like this is already ubiquitous? What does that world look like? We don't know, but we can see some hints of where it might be going.
Yeah, that's wow, that's really interesting to think about. Gen Z are not actually native to they're not they
Oh,
have you've read a book, you've written a reflective essay that you had to do by yourself, that you didn't use any tooling.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I one of my favorite kind of questions I sometimes ask my friends is, do you think as Gen Z starts having kids, are they going to be like go wild with technology, screens totally fine, or are they going to be like, no, 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 we grew up with this, like don't touch the tablet? And I think you're gonna see. I think people land in both camps, and so I'm kind of curious. As soon as you say let's ban something, we all know how that goes, right? That kind of opens the floodgates even more. One of the Anthropic ambassadors I spoke to said, this idea that we would just ban AI from classroom is certainly not going to get rid of the problem. And so, do we try to take this approach of here's how we use this constructively? I think what I do kind of come down on, though, is that especially with these stimulated AI chatbots that are trying to offer something of a social relationship, it feels like we don't really know what it means for, an adult to be like interacting with a tool like that over years and years. You see some really interesting stories trickle through about people that are spending tens of hours a week having really intimate conversations with these simulated computer programs. And I think this idea that we don't want to be experimenting on kids in real time is probably a like pretty solid notion of like, let's figure out what the effects are on adults first, maybe before just going crazy. So let's make a version that's a little more kid safe. So in a way, that's actually like a good thing in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Um, but you know, we'll see. There's been some talk from the White House recently of really doubling down on K-12 AI education and like getting these tools in at a really early age. And so there's a lot of I think kind of desire to have like this national success. There's these race dynamics going on geopolitically. There's a
Totally.
lot at play, and I think it was interesting. Sam Altman was in. He had a OpenAI CEO was before Congress, I think last week, giving a testimony about AI, and he was reflecting on his own childhood and how he got his first computer when he was 8, and how it totally changed his life trajectory, and how we're going to see a repeat of that. And a senator or a congressperson asked, kind of messed it up. Like, are you going to be willing to work with us on regulation of these products for the younger demographic? And he said yes. So we'll see how
Yeah.
that goes. But there's more conversation, I think, right now about where could this go than perhaps there was when Snapchat came out, right?
I think that's where I draw some kind of sigh of like, okay, let's talk. Like, we're all talking about it though. I remember when I was working at the Post, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, and just the word gridlock in DC was that's the only word you heard. Like, it's just gridlock, nothing can happen. It's gridlock, nothing can happen. And I was sort of thinking in my own kind of macro that they can't nothing can policy, we can't move anything forward, we can't get anything done. And so we have to figure out how to regulate and we have to co-create government and industry and the society that is actually we're using these tools are all impacting us, that we have to have a dialogue together. It's part of the reason that we're doing this show, which is just these concepts are very heady, the stuff is moving so quickly, but everyone deserves to be a part of the conversation because it's impacting all of us.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm not a policy expert, but I do have the sense, there's so many things in which everybody disagrees. And the kind of one thing people just seem to agree on is, and agree
Right.
to some extent,
Loose, yeah.
is, hey, we should do something about this. Like kids use of these tools, like how we want them to grow up, that's an area where I feel like there's a lot more alignment than even just kind of general, how do we regulate? So I think that's interesting and maybe like reason for hope. Of course, it's really hard though when you have a bunch of older people making the rules for the younger people who actually don't have any agency or voice. Especially like, I mean, they're not voting, you know, they're not equipped to be in the rooms where big decisions are being made. And so I think I really appreciate when companies or groups kind of go directly and say, like, they involve, younger people or their parents in the design process and in thinking through, you know, the actual experience of using something. I think that sort of inclusion is something I really appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, this is fascinating. I have a final question for you, but before I go there, have we gotten to everything?
I think, there's this sense that a lot of the web just kind of sucks, right? Like you go on Twitter or X and it's a mess. You go to all these offshoot platforms, they don't feel great. TikTok can be fun, but then you spend an hour in front of it and you don't feel good. At least I don't. Other people might. And I think there's been this kind of have you heard the term cozy web tossed around?
Cozy web. No. I was gonna throw out slop capitalism. That's so heavy.
Okay, I think they're related.
Okay, great. Tell us all about it. We just had an episode on slop capitalism, Aiden Walker. Okay, so tell us about cozy web.
Okay, so slop capitalism, I think, you can just kind of feel what that word means, right? I think of Facebook has had this problem of like just AI photos, generated photos of the most ridiculous things, just being flooded with that. I think in a way, like TikTok kind of is that too sometimes when you're just getting templatized, cookie cutter thing that kind of makes you feel good. I've heard it described as like a Cheeto where like it tastes good, but you're like, what did you really get? It was like there was nothing there.
Yeah, it's a Cheeto.
I think I butchered the metaphor, but something like that.
No, but I got it on the Cheeto. It hit me with the Cheeto.
Yeah.
Okay.
But cozy web, I don't know who exactly coined this term, so I apologize to them because I like it. It's this idea that there's kind of this underlayer of discords and group chats and Slack communities. These, they're a little walled off. And so that is not great from the wide web democratized sense. But there are these private spaces where people are connecting digitally around interests, where the conversations feel much more real. They're kind of a little more immune to that algorithmic tentacling, right?
Yeah.
And so I think about my favorite places online, and it's these spots. And for me, some of those communities have led to like really, really rich offline relationships with people that I encounter first in digital spaces. And then they become my friends because we've convened in this like very niche community. So that's the energy that I want, I think.
I like that. I often say like normalize niche, and I also believe like we're in it. But the future of media, the media of now, is it's this network of these niches. And I mean, the group. I can't live without my group chat. That's actually where my life is happening, and we're bringing these things into these private communities. It's interesting.
It's easy to look at the web and say this is bad or feel really not great. But I think there's still places where we can feel happy online.
I've probably said optimistic in this podcast more than I've ever said it in all the recordings that we've done to date. I'm not a tech critic, tech optimist, doomsday. I'm trying to understand, but I generally, I've been called pathologically optimistic. I think you have to be in some way to live through this. There are places where, I mean, for me, my group chat, I find joy. That is my real life. It's happening there every day. I mean, for you, where do you see some of these green shoots or hope? Yeah.
The word techno-optimist is interesting. I worked at this publication before The Atlantic where the entire publication was organized around this idea of like, can we reclaim techno-optimism? Because you get a techno-optimism that is, let's accelerate us to Mars and just be so unabashedly pro-technology, so uncritical. And there's ways in which being open to things is good, but there's also, I think that's a very narrow view of techno-optimism. And so the view that I learned there was, okay, let's be critical. But if we're going to be critical, let's also be constructive. And so if we don't like what we see now, what might we imagine as an alternative? And so for me, like, I think I look to the places online where I feel happy. And that's this idea of the cozy web.
I love that. We have to create the solutions. We are creating the solutions. We are, and we have to have some agency in that. Here's my last question for you. And this is this is a show about media, content, all of it. And we're consuming it all day long. Is there something that you've consumed very recently that's sticking with you? And it could be any platform. And yeah, tell us a story about a story.
Yeah, I think I have skirted my way around this piece a little bit already in this conversation. So I'll just kind of directly point you to it. There was a piece from New York Magazine last week. It was titled something like "Everyone's Cheating Their Way Through College." It's this excellent feature, and you've heard this idea that people are using these tools to ease their way through classes, but this piece had a lot of people that were on the record saying, yeah, I literally am cheating and I don't care. And I'm very careful not to take this subset of examples and overgeneralize it and say everybody is doing this. Like I said, like, no, I wasn't doing that. A lot of my friends were. But I think it did a really good job of pulling back the curtain. And you hear these stories within that story of people using AI to write, an essay, or you have to read it for the specific meaty anecdotes, but about things. It's just kind of ironic of thinking about education, and then you're using the chatbot that's messing up the education. But it also kind of gestured to I think there's just lots of ways in which universities are having a bit of a tricky time right now. Yeah. And this has just kind of been the last nail in the coffin. And then I would maybe pair that with the piece by Kashmir Hill in the Times this week about how teachers and college professors are using AI. And the two of those together are the perfect, I think, example that we've talked about of you have both sides using AI in a way that is maybe not helping anybody. And yet there's no sign of this cycle coming to a stop. So yeah. I think those two.
Thank you for that. We are so in it, and that we're running multiple experiments at one time. So to your point, this is very complex. I can't thank you enough for coming on and helping to shed some light on what this means for all of us. So please keep doing the work that you're doing and come back and talk to us about what alpha or beta is out there doing next.
Hopefully not beta yet.
Hopefully not beta. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Lila.
Thank you.
The Intersect is distributed exclusively by our partner, Dear Media. Today's episode was produced by Sarah Singer, our showrunner, and myself, along with technical production by Chad Peresman and coordination by Haley Duffy and Dana Binfet. Caitlin Durkin, an executive producer on the show, oversaw communications, with original show music by Tom Peel. Thank you to Music for a While and the Alameda Hotel for the use of their beautiful studio space. And if you liked our show today, please subscribe right here, wherever you are watching or listening. And we'll be back next week, right here at The Intersect.